Hi everyone! This week you'll be making claims that prove your thesis true. Yay! It is really fun. You do have to have a good foundation, so a good thesis, and watch for my comments in the Dropbox on your Lab 3 and refine your thesis before you jump into the claims. That should be coming by the end of today. So the very first thing you want to do when making claims, the sub-arguments that prove your thesis true, is write your thesis statement down. Now, a lot of people don't do this. They're like, I get it. I know what my thesis statement is. No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't know what it is because you haven't thought about the restrictions in it. It actually is a logic game. Making claims and a thesis work together, the skeletons, the bones of your argument, it's logical. And logic is not a hard thing to do for anybody. So the very first thing you do is write your thesis down. And the next thing you're going to do is identify the restrictions in it. What do you mean restrictions? That doesn't make sense. Well, restrictions are also called the basis of classification. Those are interchangeable terms. Let me talk about what they are. When you go into Walmart or Target or wherever you like to shop, you would go to the grocery section, let's say, and you would not find shampoo there. If you did, that would be weird, and you should not shop there because that is a weird store. So shampoo goes in the shampoo section and groceries go in the grocery section because we like to put things that are alike together because that makes sense and it makes life easier. The same thing goes for your writing. You would not talk about something you said you were not going to talk about. So if my thesis is that year-round schooling has positive effects on children, I would not talk about traditional schooling where summers are off, because I said I was going to focus on year-round schooling. So why in the heck would I go outside of the boundary of year-round schooling? So when you create a thesis statement, you're actually making restrictions. You're telling your reader what you will and will not talk about. So there's a positive and negative that lives inside that very important thesis sentence. Let's take a look at that. So in the student example I'm about to show you, let's try to identify if the student went outside their boundaries that they said they were not going to go outside of. This is an actual student thesis from last semester, said today's generation of kids aged 12 and under have a lack of interest in baseball due to the slow nature of the game. Now, I can identify 3 different restrictions or bases of classification in this sentence. The first one, they're only going to talk about kids 12 and under. If I see kids 18 sneak in their paper, whether in a claim or in a support, I know they've gone outside their thesis and they have broadened the claims beyond what they said they were going to talk about. Wrong. If I see that they're going to talk about anything other than a lack of interest in the game, so if they start talking about why the game of baseball is so exciting, they've gone outside their thesis. I also see that they're going to talk only about the slow nature of the game. If they talk about the fast-paced nature of the game or places where it's very exciting, they've gone outside their thesis. If they wish to talk about things outside their thesis, they need to make their thesis bigger. Make the sentence so it includes that information. You cannot talk about anything you said that you were not going to talk about. Okay, so let's look at the claims that this actual student submitted for the Lab 4. The slow, lethargic game of baseball is a stark contrast to the bombardment of stimulus kids are receiving at home and elsewhere in their lives. So this second half of the sentence talks about a bombardment of stimulus, but the thesis itself says it's going to focus on the lack of interest because of the slow nature. I would say that this thesis statement needs to be expanded to consider why kids might think that the gameplay is slow. For instance, they say today's generation of kids, so that's kind of hinting at it, but they could say something along the lines of kids 12 and under have a much different reality than kids did prior to the technological boom. In turn, baseball is losing its fan base. That would include, if that was their thesis, that would include why, give your reader some hint and cover this claim. So your thesis is an umbrella. It has to cover your claims. If it doesn't, if one of your claims is sticking out there with information that shouldn't be there, you've done it wrong. Number 2, the rules allow for many time delays throughout the game, thus straining kids' attention spans further. Perfect. That's perfect. It lives under the claim. However, notice 1 and 2. They're almost identical statements. They're just stated a little bit differently. The slow, lethargic nature of the game is in a contrast to fast-paced stimuli. Then number 2 says the rules caused delays, straining attention spans. So claim number 2 actually works with this thesis, and claim number 1 seems to be proof, should be maybe in the support section of claim number 2. So these are too close together. Claim number 3, the introduction of the instant replay and coaches challenge have contributed to the extended game times. So now they're talking about more evidence. This is evidence that would belong maybe in a claim that doesn't even exist yet, because if I can answer it quickly, it's not a claim. If it's a yes or no answer, it's like a fact. It's a yes or no question, don't divide a room. And as we know, if you read Lab 4, claims follow all the same rules of thesis statements. So it cannot be a simple yes or no, because you have to write a lot for each CSE section, maybe 2 to 3 pages. How are you going to write 2 to 3 pages on the introduction of the instant replay and coaches challenges have contributed to extended game times? Your paragraph would be like, yes, it does, period, the end. That's not a paper. So all these rules that we're going to go over in the next video have to live in your head simultaneously, but the very first thing you do when making claims is write down the thesis. Figure out the restrictions in it. Highlight them if you need to in red, like I have for this student's example. You cannot go outside of what you said you're going to talk about. This is the most common mistake students make. They don't get this. We do not put shampoo in the grocery section. That's weird. We wouldn't shop there. We do not talk about what we said we were not going to talk about because we won't read a paper. That's a waste of time. So, step number 1, find your restrictions or your basis of classification. You have to live within that reality.